With the 2026 Senate primary coming up, I decided it might be a good idea to go over the people that I am personally supporting and endorsing for the primary. For the Democratic Party specifically, I'm not a Republican, so. This also goes for the general. Just assume I'm endorsing the Democrat who wins the primary. But I'll be going over my reasons why. Let's start with Minnesota. I'm not too familiar with this Senate race, but from the options that I've seen, it looks like Peggy Flanagan is the best of the options. She is a progressive, whereas her opponent is a centrist. Peggy Flanagan supports Medicare for All, which I think is great. I love like healthcare. Whoa. She's supportive of trans people and supports abolishing ICE, which that's awesome. New Hampshire, it looks like the best option is Karishma Manzoor. I don't know how to pronounce the name entirely, but they seem pretty cool. They don't accept APAC money, but they're not likely to win. They're polling very low in comparison to their centrist counterpart who's leading the poll. Not a not a state I've heard many people talking about. It's likely to go to the Democrats anyways, but I thought it was worth mentioning anyways. Now for Georgia, it is John Ossoff is pretty much the only candidate. He's a really strong candidate from like a performance perspective. He's incredibly good at fundraising as well. He's a great messenger, but I have some issues with his voting history. He's pretty pro Israel. He has been against Medicare for All, and he voted for the Laken Riley Act, which it was just a pretty bad immigration law in general. He also supports ICE reform, but not abolishing ICE, which that's pretty bad for me. I think we need Democrats to abolish or to support abolishing ICE. For Maine, I am going to endorse Graham Plattner, the oyster farmer. Now, there's a few reasons of doing this. Graham Plattner has run a very strong progressive grassroots campaign. There have been a few controversies, like the tattoo and the Reddit history. What I see from that is like growth, like change. And I'm focusing a lot on his policy perspective. I've seen a lot of people saying that they are concerned that Graham Plattner will be the next to John Fetterman. I do think that's unlikely. Fetterman has always had, he always had those signs available, and Fetterman also quite literally had a stroke. And then, went further to the right, so, As long as Graham Plattner doesn't have a stroke, should be good. He's very pro-union, pro-working class, anti-billionaire, condemns the genocide in Gaza. He, policy-wise, looking from a strictly policy perspective, he is fantastic on pretty much all fronts. And Janet Mills is his opponent. She, if elected, will be the oldest first-term senator in American history. That's kind of crazy that it's between a young progressive and, the oldest centrist to run for their first term in Senate. Why? She's also pro-Israel, which that's not good. I don't want my money going to Israel, right? I think we need to condition our aid at the very least. They're killing babies. I'm not a big fan of Israel. For Michigan, I'm gonna go with Abdul Al Sayed. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. Sorry if it's not. He's a progressive, and I believe he was a doctor. He supports Medicare for all, abolishing ICE, and is pro-Palestine. That's pretty good. He is, I think, polling third, but not too far behind. Like, we're still a bit out from that primary. I don't know too much about the other candidates, but I know that Abdul Al Sayed, he's a really good one. He has good policies. I've heard him in a few interviews a few times. Great candidate. I'm really hoping he wins. North Carolina. Roy Cooper has never lost a North Carolina election. He's fairly progressive, and I think he's literally the only campaign in that race. So, like, yeah, he's gonna win at least the Democratic primary. So we'll see him win that. Alaska, Mary Peltola. She's a very strong candidate from electoral standpoint. She has a strong chance of flipping Alaska, and is pretty much the only candidate. Like, there's, I think, one other person running, and they're, like, not too notable. Ohio, Sherrod Brown. He's an interesting guy. He's, like, fairly centrist from what I've seen, but, like, from a policy perspective, like, from his history, he is surprisingly woke. And he is unfortunately in the pocket of AIPAC, which is the Israel-America Pact, basically. He has a solid chance of flipping the Ohio seat, and is realistically the only candidate. Now for Texas, I am endorsing James Tallarico. Now, I'm a big fan of James Tallarico. I think he's run a really good, impressive, progressive campaign. Like, he's strong on messaging. He's polling well in the general. Like, if he does win the primary, he's polling really well in the general. And he's the news refers to him as a liberal pastor. He has a very progressive voting history from what I've seen. I like him on pretty much all fronts, except I think he's a little soft on Israel. He basically said he would only vote for defensive aid to Israel, and that's just not enough. I was disappointed to hear that, but overall he's a good candidate, strong messaging, great grassroots campaign, and he's not in the pocket of the Democratic establishment. The same cannot be said for his opponent, which is Jasmine Crockett, who is also running for Texas Senate. Now, Jasmine Crockett is a very good communicator. I'd like to compare her with Jon Ossoff. She's really good at messaging. Like, she talks incredibly well, but her voting history is pretty much centrist. It's incredibly disappointing to look through her voting history. So I am backing James Tallarico. I believe he's the more progressive candidate. I believe he's the one that I think has a better chance in the general election as well. He's more likely to mobilize low propensity voters. And he's, like, very unwavering in his support for LGBTQ people. He fled the state of Texas during the gerrymandering bill. He was one of the people in the interviews while that was happening. Like, he temporarily fled to avoid voting on the gerrymandering bill. I thought it was pretty cool. So I am hoping that James Tallarico wins. Right now, the polling for the primary, he is down. It looks like Jasmine Crockett is leading that. I think Jasmine Crockett is still a fine candidate. I just don't think she's as good as James Tallarico. And finally, for Nebraska. Now, Nebraska doesn't really have a Democrat running, but it does have an independent, Dan Osborne. Dan Osborne isn't likely to basically get elected as an independent and just vote along with the Democrats. He's likely to stay independent in the Senate. But it's independent versus Republican, and I will take a independent over a Republican, right? So I think Dan Osborne, he has a okay chance. I mean, there's not too much polling out yet. There's, I think, 2 polls. They're internal polls by his team. He's behind by 1 point, and when it's a internal poll, they usually favors the candidate. So I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. I'm hoping he wins, but I don't know. Yeah, that's my list of endorsements and thoughts on the 2026 Senate election. Those are most of the swing states. Those are all the ones I felt were interesting to cover. See ya.